Recently, I've published a video about why we need a free Team Fortress 2. Go watch it if you haven't already, since this one will be a follow-up to it. My proposal there was that we should create a free and open source clone of TF2 to help preserve this game for future generations. You fellas seemed very interested in that idea and made some excellent observations that I'd like to address and further discuss here. I'll also detail my personal plan, tips, and some general guidelines for making this project become a reality. If that's all you're interested in, feel free to skip the video to the timestamp I'm showing on screen right now. But I invite you to stick around because we'll first have an interesting discussion. Let's jump right into it.
TF2 is already free, you are being silly!
TF2 is free of charge, meaning you can play it for free on Steam. However, people can't freely distribute and modify TF2 because it is proprietary closed-source software. That means only Valve has the rights to distribute and modify TF2, or to concede rights to do so. Essentially, they control what happens to TF2 and who can get access to it. When I say TF2 should be free, I'm not saying it should be free of charge or free to play. I'm saying it should be free and open source software. I'm proposing we should create a clone of TF2 that everyone should be legally able to modify and distribute. If you want to know more about free and open source software and how this all works, I'm putting some links in the description with some more information.
We already have TF2 clones around, for example in Roblox.
Roblox is a private corporation and their game engine, Roblox Studio, is proprietary software. So even if there are those TF2 clones, Roblox Corporation holds some degree of ownership over them. Also, about the current TF2 fan remakes, built in other engines like Unity and Unreal, those are very impressive projects, but all the ones I've seen use assets pulled straight from TF2, and that would allow Valve to take down such projects. Valve doesn't have a history of doing such things, but I don't think we would be wise to risk it. We never know what will be Valve's policy on fan games and mods 10 or 20 years from now, and I'm interested in an alternative that could secure the future of this project.
Valve would have the legal rights to shut it down!
It depends. If we pull assets and code straight from TF2 or from other products, of which Valve holds ownership or copyrights, then yes, they absolutely would have the legal rights to shut it down, because we would be infringing their intellectual property. However, that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing we develop something completely original that clones the gameplay mechanics and systems of TF2. I'm not a lawyer, so take this with a grain of salt, but according to an article published by the American Bar Association, which has nothing to do with pubs and bars but is actually a lawyers' association, go figure, copyright law protects the original expression of ideas, but not the ideas themselves. That makes a lot of sense if you think about it. You can copyright a drawing you made of a red flower, but you can't copyright the idea of drawing a red flower. So you can't stop other people from drawing the same subject, as long as they are original enough in their expression. Game mechanics and systems are just ideas. No one owns the idea of rocket jumping, of having a medic class, of disguising as someone from the enemy team, of being able to build sentry turrets, etc. What Valve owns is how they originally expressed those ideas, materialized in graphics and sound design, and on programming code. We can legally express those same ideas and concepts as long as we express them in our own original manner. Another important thing is to not infringe on trademarks. That's why in the original video I mentioned we shouldn't use the Team Fortress name. We can say we are making something inspired by Team Fortress 2 or remaking TF2's core mechanics, but we can't say that thing is Team Fortress 2 in any manner or form. That brand name doesn't belong to us. And it also goes without saying that we shouldn't be using models, textures, sounds, or any other assets pulled from Valve products, because that would be asking for legal trouble.
They would still try to shut it down regardless of that.
That's like saying Gabe Newell could show up at your house to steal your car. Sure, he could do that in the sense that it could be possible for that to happen in the realm of reality, but it is very unlikely they would bother to do that, because clearly they would be on the wrong side of law if we cover our bases properly. You don't see, for example, Microsoft, who owns the Microsoft Office suite, trying to sue or shut down LibreOffice, Google's Office suite, or WPS Office. All those other applications essentially do the same thing that Microsoft Office does, but are original works protected under copyright law. Microsoft can't legally shut down those projects because the idea of an Office suite isn't copyrightable. And all of those suites are even very similar in how they work and even look to the end user. Again, as long as we are implementing the same ideas, game mechanics in this case, in our own original way, we should be legally safe. I'm no lawyer, but from what information I could research, this seems to be the case. If you have professional experience with such topics, please let us know in this video's comments.
People would not play this instead of TF2.
And that's fine. Some people pointed out that this clone of TF2 wouldn't be appealing for a multitude of reasons. It wouldn't have the same magic TF2 has because it wouldn't have the same art style and characters. People wouldn't want to leave their items behind on the old TF2. Such an independent project would have trouble implementing anti-cheat. All the servers would have to be paid by independent providers, unlike TF2, which has official servers run by Valve, and a bunch of other very reasonable arguments. You are all correct in that I really doubt this clone of TF2 would be able to gather a sizable community of players, if at all. And that's not a problem, because the goal here isn't to make something that will substitute TF2, but to make an effort to create a clone of TF2 that can be freely distributed and modified. I'll go into detail about that goal later in the video, but I want to make it clear here that the idea isn't to make TF2 superfluous or anything like that.
The community would mess it up.
I've seen people worried that the community wouldn't be capable of working properly on content updates or weapon balance. This wouldn't be an issue, because the idea of this project is just to make a bare-bones recreation of the core gameplay mechanics of TF2. Then, anyone can take this and do whatever they want with it. Do you want to keep things as vanilla as possible? You can do that. Do you want to develop a brand new, different game with additional mechanics and systems? Go for it. The beauty of free and open source software is that it is yours to do what you want with it. Anyone can at any point make a copy of the base project and work from it, to suit their own personal vision and objectives. If we license the original project under GPL, we also have the guarantee that any changes made to it in the future will also have to be freely available for everyone to use. But I'll go into more detail about that license later in the video. Some of you were also concerned about community developers and contributors adding malicious code to this project. That is not impossible, but considering the project would be open source, anyone with the knowledge to do so could check the code to see if there's anything wrong with it. In general, you are better off trusting open source software than closed source software. For instance, some time ago a security expert found a very serious security flaw on Source Engine games and reported the problem to Valve, with instructions on how to fix it. It took Valve more than a full year to address that issue, while everyone was vulnerable to bad actors discovering how to abuse that flaw. We were lucky the one who actually found it first was a security expert with good intentions, and not some black hat hacker. I'll leave a link below with more information on this if you are curious. If TF2 were an open source project, instead of having to wait on Valve to do something, this security expert could have fixed the problem himself and submitted the code to the project maintainer, who would most certainly have applied the fix in a more timely manner than Valve did.
How would we make this happen?
Okay, now let's talk business. Some of you mentioned you'd like to be involved with this project, contributing some of your talent and skill under an organized structure. If you feel that is the way to go for you, go ahead and cooperate with other people to achieve that goal. Personally, I think that despite being a productive way to do things, managing a large group of people to produce such a large-scale project can be a daunting task, and a lot can go wrong in that process. So, as an alternative to that, I'd like to propose the following workflow. If you don't already have a defined skill set, then start by picking something you'd like to learn. 2D art, 3D modeling, texturing, animation, coding, game design, etc. When you have some familiarity with the tools and skills you are interested in, start working on a project with small and limited scope that you can see yourself completing in a reasonable time frame. That project could be a 2D concept art or a 3D model for an original character. Or if you are a programmer, you could try making a small game using movements similar to what we have in TF2. What's important is that you can release this small project so that you don't get stuck on it trying to make something grandiose. If you can, try to make this project modular, so it is easy for you and for other people to reuse parts of it on future projects. After it is complete, release your project somewhere on the internet, GitHub, itch.io, OpenGameArt, under an open source license, preferably GPL for code or applications, and Creative Commons by SA 4.0 in the case of art assets. I'll explain the reason behind those specific licenses later. Share your project around, let people know you just made something TF2 inspired, but original, and that it has a free and open source license. To aid in that, I've set up a Game Jam page on itch.io, so at least we have an initial landing ground for people interested in participating. I'll leave the link to that page down below for you. However, don't think this is the only place you can participate. Anyone is free to start subreddits, Discord servers, your own game jams, whatever you feel like could help gather people around this common objective. If you do set up something like that, let us know so we can help you spread the word about it to other like-minded people. After all of that, start another small project. Create or implement something else inspired or related to TF2 and release it once more under a free and open source license. The idea behind this workflow is that instead of trying to coordinate a huge team of people with mismatching interests, we can work individually to build something larger than what each one of us can achieve. Someone will work on making concept art, someone will work on modeling, texturing, and animating, someone will work on making environment art assets, another person will implement character movement in code, another one will work on specific weapons, and so on, all independently. Multiple people will implement the same features in different manners, and because each individual project will be free and open sourced, we will all be able to check each other's work to improve our own. With enough time and people doing this, we will eventually have a large enough base of code and assets that could be integrated into a single application, our clone of TF2. And the idea isn't to just have a single clone, but multiple, so we can pick and choose the best parts of which one to build our own projects. I, for instance, am planning on making a small game in which you play as a character that moves like the medic and uses a weapon like the Crusader's crossbow to shoot at targets. It will be a game about movement and precision shooting with a projectile weapon. That way I, and others, can reuse parts of this project to then make something that resembles Scout, Pyro, Soldier. I think you see where I'm going with this. Feel free to use that same idea, by the way. Basically, each one of us will create individual parts of a TF2 clone and make them freely available. So someday, any one of us could put those parts together and make a full TF2 clone. Is that the most direct and focused way of doing this? Certainly not. Having coordinated teams could be a lot more efficient. However, I feel like doing it in this spread out and diffuse manner is a more realistic way of kickstarting things, and it could help people find their peers to constitute large dedicated teams.
What is our objective?
I mentioned earlier that the idea isn't to make something that could substitute TF2. We are not developing a market competitor to TF2. because, frankly, that's something only a professional team of developers could do, and they would have to put a lot of effort, time, and resources into it. Our goal is simpler: to preserve TF2's systems and mechanics independently from Valve and to offer to other developers a base of code and assets they could use to make mods and full games inspired by TF2. Mainly, what got me thinking about this initiative was seeing TF2 Classic and Open Fortress at risk of being taken down by Valve. If they had a free and open source codebase to work from, especially in the case of Open Fortress, which is really an original game and not just another version of TF2, they could be in a more secure position, legally speaking. So that's the goal: to preserve bits and pieces of how TF2 plays and looks to a limited extent, of course, so even if Valve someday goes under or allows TF2 to decay into an unplayable state, we will have some sort of backup of the game that we or other developers can use to bring it back somehow. That's the objective.
Why should we use those specific licenses?
In the case of code, games, and applications, I believe the GNU General Public License, GPL, would be the best, because it allows anyone to freely distribute and modify a project as long as they make those modifications also freely available and distributable. It is a license that works kinda like a virus. If I release a project under GPL and someone else uses my project to build something else, they are also obligated to release that to the public under GPL, making it so anyone can freely distribute and modify their work. That's why usually commercial work avoids touching GPL projects as much as possible, because it forbids private individuals and corporations from grabbing code that's freely available and using it to make a proprietary product. In regards to art assets, I recommend the Creative Commons by SA 4.0 license, because it is compatible with GPL and because it allows free use of assets while requiring attribution and that any derivative works also be released under the same license. So if I release a 3D model under that license and someone uses it on a project or as a base for a new art asset, they have to give me credit for it, and their derivative work has to also be released under Creative Commons by SA 4.0. You can see how this is great for a community project, because no single individual or corporation could snatch our work and make it closed and proprietary, at least not legally, so that's why I'm recommending those two licenses. I'll leave below some articles explaining their details.
Why use the old Godot engine?
For those unfamiliar with it, the Godot game engine is a free and open source game engine that is become ever more popular, being feature-rich and easy to use. It is not the industry standard like Unreal Engine or Unity, but in its current version it is perfectly capable of making complex 2D and 3D games, be it single-player or multiplayer, and it will be even better in the upcoming 4.0 version. I suggest we use Godot for building the code and application part of this project for two reasons. It is completely free and open source, released under the MIT license, so it has absolutely no strings attached. You can do whatever you want with the engine and no one is ever going to throw licensing fees or limitations in your face. Unity and Unreal are also free to start using, but they have peculiar licensing practices and rules, while also being privately owned, so we have no guarantee their current business model will remain the same forever. Because of that, using those engines could potentially jeopardize our efforts in the long run, so I would avoid them. Although you can code in other languages, Godot has its own programming language, GDScript, which is perfect for our project because it is very noob-friendly and because it is quite different from the C++ that was used by Valve to code their games. I imagine it would be easier for someone to start copying Valve's original code and thus put their project at risk of infringing copyright if they were to also code in the same language used by Valve developers. GDScript, however, is unique to Godot, and because of that, coding in that language could help us recreate TF2's mechanics in a new and original way. But in the end, it is your choice what tools you use in your projects. What matters most is that it is licensed as free and open source and doesn't infringe anyone's copyright.
Now I get it. You are crazy.
So these are my ideas for making a free and open source clone of TF2 that wouldn't infringe Valve's intellectual properties. I'd love to see a large team of experienced and dedicated developers and artists tackle this challenge, but sadly, I don't see that happening anytime soon for multiple reasons. That's why I'm proposing we work individually on what we can, making sure to release our projects as free and open source, until one day we'll have enough pieces to put together a complete game that would serve as a base for other developers and for the preservation of how TF2 functions and plays, independent from Valve software. And what do you think about this, now that you've heard a bit more of my ideas? Do you think this spread out approach is the most realistic one? Do you think it would be possible for a large team to get together and achieve these goals, much like we have dedicated teams developing mods, for example? Do you think I'm crazy for worrying about making sure TF2 is preserved for future generations as an entity independent from Valve software? Would that even be possible? Let me know your opinions in the comments down below, because I really appreciate reading and pondering about your perspective on the topics of my videos. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe so you don't miss my future content. Bye bye!